Okay, so today you guys are going to be working on a bunch of different word problems. So there's a couple vocabulary terms that we have to go over to make sure that you guys understand what they mean as you guys read through these word problems, okay? So I'm going to draw a little diagram and kind of picture this out for you guys to make it a little bit easier. Okay, so I've got my little person right here, and a person's line of sight. Kind of picture this as you guys are walking either down the hallway or just out and about. You're always looking straight forward. So a person's line of sight is always going to be straight ahead or parallel to the ground. Okay? But from this line of sight, you have some options. And according to the way that your book determines it, you can either have an angle of elevation or an angle of depression. So if they ever talk about an angle of elevation, that means from your line of sight, so from this dotted line that we have, an angle of elevation would be how far you look up. So from this line of sight, if I look up to a certain angle, this angle right inside here is called my angle of elevation. Okay? But there's also another way that you can look. Instead of looking up in terms of elevation, you can look down, and that's called the angle of depression. So from that line of sight, there's also an option instead of looking up to look down. So if they ever talk about an angle of depression, they're talking about how far you look down from your original line of sight. So this right here is called the angle of depression. Okay, now, most of the time this is actually pretty easy to determine, but when this actually gets into, gets people into trouble is when they talk about the angle of depression. So we're going to kind of talk about this a little bit more. So let's say that we have an airplane that's in the air, so I'm going to draw my airplane. Okay, here's my airplane. And let's say that there's an object on the ground. Okay, so for an example, if I say that this airplane is, 2 miles above the ground. So that's a vertical distance that we measure that height. So from the ground to the airplane is a distance of 2 miles. So what they're going to say, if they're going to use these vocabulary terms, they're going to say that the airplane sees an object at the ground at, let's say, 30 degrees angle of depression. But what you have to remember is an airplane is always looking, the line of sight is always straight forward. So if it's looking down at this object, so from this airplane down at the object, if they told you the angle of depression is 30 degrees, we're actually talking about from the original line of sight, so from this dotted line, how far down the plane looked. So this angle right here is 30 degrees. Now why is that a little bit challenging? Well, that's not part of the original triangle. So if we're looking at part of the original triangle, if an airplane is looking straight forward and they're talking about the height of the airplane that's moving straight vertically up and down, this entire thing is actually a 90-degree angle right here. Okay? So that's 90 degrees. So if my angle of depression was 30, well then the angle that I'm going to use inside the triangle is going to be 60 degrees. Okay, so that's one of the major things that you have to watch out for when we're talking about angle of depression. Most times when they say angle of depression, they're actually talking about an angle that doesn't coincide with something that's inside the triangle. Most of the time it ends up being outside the triangle. So let's right now turn to that worksheet that was given out for you guys. Okay, number one, we're gonna skip that because right away that's gonna be a problem that we're gonna look at later. Okay, number two, let's go through and read this. So it says a ski lift is to be built on top of Bald Mountain. From the base of the lift to the angle of elevation of the top of the mountain is 37 degrees. From a point 185 feet further away from the mountain, the angle of elevation is 29 degrees and 43 minutes. Find the length of the ski lift. Okay, there's a lot going on here, so let's actually draw a picture so we can figure this out. It says from the base of the lift The angle of elevation of the top of the mountain is 37 degrees. Okay, so let me draw my mountain. Go figure my mountain is going to look like a triangle. Okay? Okay, and I'm going to put a dot right at this corner. So this is the base of the mountain. So if I'm standing at the base of the mountain looking up, that angle of elevation, remember my line of sight is always straight forward, so I'm kind of looking towards the base of the mountain. Then that means that angle of elevation right here is 37 degrees. Okay, so the next part says, from a point 185 feet further away from the mountain. So if this is where I was originally standing, I'm going to go another 185 feet further away from the mountain. Now my angle of elevation, so again, I'm still looking the same direction. So now I'm here at this red point, still looking forward. Now my angle of elevation to the top of the mountain, so that means this angle right here, comes out to be 29 degrees and 43 minutes. They want us to find the length of the ski lift. Well, what is a ski lift? Well, the ski lift starts at the base of the mountain and it goes up the mountain. So what they're really asking for is this distance right here, the green highlight. They want that distance. Okay? So what I want you guys to do for problems like this is not a right triangle. So we're going to just at least diagram it out, so when we come back to it in the next couple of days that we know how to actually do it. So you guys are just actually getting practice drawing the picture without having to do any of the math. Okay, so I will be okay with you guys leaving this one right here. Now, if I look at a problem like number 3 ends up having a right triangle, so we can go through and actually solve this. So number 3 says, a ladder makes a 52-degree angle with the ground. The ladder rests against a building at a point that is 71 feet from the ground. What is the length of the ladder? Okay, so let's draw a picture of this. I have a building. There's my building. And I've got a ladder resting up against that building. So I'm going to draw my ladder. Okay? It says it makes a 52-degree angle with the ground. So here's my ladder, and here is the ground. It's going to make a 52-degree angle between the ladder and the ground. It says the ladder rests against the building. It's 71 feet from the ground. So here is where the building is in blue, and here's where my ladder is, all the way over here, and the distance between the building and the ladder is 71 feet away. And they want to know what's the length of the ladder. So they want to know, and I'll highlight that in green, they want to know what is this length right here. Well, if you know anything about buildings, the way they build buildings is to have them perpendicular to the ground. They should be going straight up. So according to this building, this is supposed to be a right triangle. Okay, so I can actually solve this one. Well, I know my angle is 52 degrees. It's right here, right there. And they gave me two sides. They gave me 71. 71, according to this, is my adjacent. And I need to find x. Well, x is the hypotenuse. Okay, well, because I have a right triangle, I'm going to be using SOHCAHTOA. And if I have adjacent hypotenuse, that means I'm going to be using cosine. So, let's set this up. Cosine of my angle, which is 52, equals the adjacent, which is 71, over my hypotenuse, which is x. Okay, now I have to just solve for x. So I'm going to multiply both sides by x to get that out of the denominator. So x cosine of 52 equals 71. I'm going to get x by itself. To get rid of that cosine of 52, I'm going to divide both sides of cosine of 52. So x comes out being 71 over the cosine of 52. And this is going to go into my calculator. Please make sure that you guys have it in the right mode. And so when I type this into my calculator, I get my answer of 115.32 feet. and I got to make sure I label my units, and that is the length of the ladder. So at this point, what I'm going to let you guys do is just finish this worksheet. If it is a right triangle, solve it, just like we did with number 3. But if it's not a right triangle, kind of like problem number 2, write down what information that the graph gave you so you guys have practice actually drawing these pictures. Okay? I hope this video helped, and please let me know if you guys have any questions. All right, thanks.